Welcome to Dance to Heal. I'm your host, Jenny C. Cohen. Join me as I share stories of how dance and movement can bring healing in a way that is safe and tailored to your life. I'm a cancer survivor, mother of two, and an award-winning performer who found that movement was vital to my recovery. I created Dance to Heal Wellness and also authored the best-selling book, Outside in Recovery, Dancing My Way Back to Myself After Breast Cancer. I will bring new techniques to help you on your dance journey and healing path. Are you ready to move? Dance to Heal starts now. Dan Hegerich is a heroic performance life coach and 6-time cancer survivor who's been cancer-free for over 20 years. His life's mission is to help you become a warrior for your wellness. It's such a pleasure to have you here, Dan, today. Thank you for coming.
Jenny, I just feel your enthusiasm for everything. We've had a conversation a while back, and, I was like energized after that conversation. I had to sort of breathe through it because you're so sincere, you're so genuine, and I'm so honored to be on your podcast as a fellow cancer survivor, cancer thrivers, trying to make a difference in this world, especially in regards to not just cancer, but chronic degenerative disease as we know it and through our experiences. So I'm grateful, and I'm ready to see where we go. Lead us into the what is it? The abyss.
Today's topic, we're going to try to stay on topic because I know we're going to have Dan come back. For me, part of the the cancer recovery, why did I mix it up with dance? That's interesting. My cancer recovery process has been figuring out what caused my cancer, what led me to have cancer. And one of the huge things for me was looking at my food choices, which is why I love today's topic being the food mastery has a portal to freedom. That's what we call this episode. Would you please share with the audience why this is a passion of yours, Dan?
Well, I think it's because I'm a self-proclaimed foodie. Mm-hmm. And I can actually lose myself in food, right? And when we talk about food mastery, it is the hardest thing to master in our human experience because of our vulnerabilities in it and how fast it can offer us immediate gratification. And then I've learned from some of the great masters that I've come across that there was 3 basic ways to improve your evolution or to speed up your evolution or to move in your evolution in a more joyful way, which is do your yoga. And I'll explain these in a second in my own personal way. Do your yoga, fasting, and meditation. So yoga, it doesn't have to be yoga, but it has to be some kind of active mobility in order for you to sit in meditation without being distracted by the body. So most people can't sit on the floor cross-legged or whatever in a comfortable way. So they have to prop themselves up, but then they might be distracted by the aches and pains or the stiffness of the body. So yoga was designed not for exercise per se, but to open up the joints, open up the meridians, open up the chakras so you could sit in meditation. The next thing is fasting allows you to actually be in your body without the distractions of the body again. Mm-hmm. And it gives you an opportunity to go without, I have to go within. And so food mastery became one of those pillars for me because I'm a self-proclaimed foodie, and I know how important nutrition is in our game plan for reestablishing health and well-being. And I think we could do a little sidebar here just as a concept. So initially in 1995, when I had a failed bone marrow transplant, my wife and I was at a pinnacle point because I had just gotten out of the bone marrow transplant, and I was really soul drained and physically did not feel an internal motivation or an internal inspiration until my wife grabbed me from the lapels. She just literally grabbed me like this. And I was saying, I don't think I want to do any more chemo ever. I just want to ride this out and see what God does with it. Those weren't the actual language, but it was something similar. And she said, no, you got to do it. Mm-hmm. And that was the feeling that she had put her life force energy into me. Like she sacrificed what she had as vitality reserves or spiritual reserve. And I received it like two paddles on a heart, you know, the heart resuscitation when you have to put the paddles on there. It was similar to that she gave me the inspiration. It was like, okay, in that moment, I said, well, I have to make some serious changes in my diet and exercise program. Now, this is the concept. Everyone has said that or knows that diet and exercise are the pillars, the ultimate pillars for lasting change and making changes and transformation. But not everyone's diet is nourishing.
Bingo.
And here's the challenge is we need to upgrade our language from diet to nourishment or nutrition. Don't look at diet as something that's restrictive or any of these other things. You are on a diet no matter what you're doing. It doesn't matter. So when you say, I don't do diets, I've tried all the diets, well, you're still on a diet. And that doesn't mean what you're on is nourishing. In fact, if you are resentful for your diet, that's malnourishing in and of itself, psychologically. So we need to understand nutrition, and the best way to understand nourishment and nutrition is through what diet is. So diet is everything that you put into your eyes, ears, nose, and mouth, and on your skin, because your skin consumes 60 to 80% of what you put on it. That's how a Nicoderm patch works, the tobacco patch, right? And that's how essential oils work. So we need to be very cognizant. Not only is it in the day-to-day, year-to-year, what you've been doing with your diet, we need to know what was your mother's diet like before conception? Did she actually prepare the Garden of Eden for the seed of your soul to come in and take root?
Bingo.
Or did our society neglect that and take life for granted? Yeah, I think we did, especially with the way people are born into this world, and never mind born into this world, but conceived. It's a sacred process that we've lost.
Yes.
And you need to build that holy temple in that Garden of Eden. And some cultures would spend 2 years between children to make sure that there was a recovery and a rebuilding process and a fertilization process. So nourishment is the feminine, right? It's to nourish. And I think our society has been in a masculine drive for so long through industrial ages and information ages that we've neglected our feminine, our divine feminine, to nourish. And so I want people to think of their diet as, is it nourishing or malnourishing? If it's not nourishing, it is malnourishing, because nothing stands still in this plane of living. Mm-hmm. And food mastery is just one component of nourishment. It's a major pillar, but it's very important. Community of support of like-minded people to take you to who you want to be in the world, that's nourishment. Having a good mentor, that's nourishment. So I don't want to go too far off track and just stick with food mastery, is to see what is your current relationship with food. And feeding yourself, not just the food, but how do you feed yourself? How do you actually take the food that you are with, and how do you prepare it? How do you sit down, and how do you extend gratitude for it? The whole process of essentially feeding ourselves. So this is part of food mastery. And a lot of people don't really understand that when you eat is just as important as what you eat. So let's just break that one concept down for this particular discussion. When you eat is only two ways you eat. You eat when you're hungry, when you biologically and chemically have the message that you're actually cellularly hungry. The other way, that's called true hunger. So satisfying true hunger. The other way people consume food or other things is to satisfy false hunger. Mm-hmm. And 90% of the time, most people, or even more, people don't understand the two different signals. And fasting, when it's done appropriately and with a sense of practice, you start to get in touch with that true self, or the true hunger signals. And you get to create a separation between what am I feeding, true hunger, Or am I feeding the false hunger, which is my emotionality, my boredoms, my depressions, my anxieties, et cetera, or the fact that I just can because food is so available?
I have to interject a question here because it's very popular right now for people of a certain age. I see a lot of this. Maybe it's because I've set up the algorithm for being over 50 and I'm in menopause, right? And I'm a cancer survivor, and they're talking about a lot of women worry about weight gain or decreased muscle mass, and there's a huge proponent of intermittent fasting where this is encouragement to spread out your not eating upwards of to 16 hours a day. Is that what you're referring to, or something else, Dan?
That's just a small component.
Mm-hmm.
Most people are underfed. In others, they're undernourished because they're eating the wrong food.
Mm-hmm.
So that goes into what you're eating, right?
Yeah.
As well. And the first thing, if we're directing it towards menopausal women, is hormonal balance and neurological balance. So you have to actually be insulin friendly with your meals. And a lot of people don't understand that you have to learn how to eat 3 meals a day without snacking in between the meals. So they're jumping on the fad of intermittent fasting, but not even knowing that you might have to take a step backwards in order to build a foundation of genetic healing. Meaning, Dr. Don Klum is one of my mentors in this arena, and he says that we have these genes. Our genetic makeup is looking for periods of time of not eating. Why? Because we do not build a body when we eat. We break the body down.
Yes.
So let me just give a comparison to some people if that's new to them. If you exercise breaks the body down. When you rest and sleep, that's when healing takes place. So it's the same analogy to not eating. So when we're feeding ourselves, it goes into a catabolic state. You have to break those nutrients down. So it's in a breaking down mode. When you heal, that is when you actually start to repair and rejuvenate the body relative to the raw material you gave it. Okay, and there's a lot of confusion in all of that. Mm-hmm. So from a menopausal woman, eat 3 meals a day within a 12-hour window with no snacking, including flavored beverages. They should be taken with a meal. Right. That's going to be enough of a challenge for the majority of people, since the average person eats food about 15 to 17 times a day. Mm-hmm. And that means even if you just go for that handful of peanuts,
that's eating.
That's a meal to the body. If you're just tasting all day, if you're cooking and tasting all the time, that sets into motion the body's ability to actually digest what you're eating. So you're not giving the body a rest. And in Chinese medicine, the digestive tract is a yang system. It means it only works when it needs to. It doesn't have to constantly be on, like the yin energy organs, like the heart is constantly working. And that's kind of the feminine, right? Constantly on. That's why they chat all the time. They just have to keep the action going. The lungs, the respiratory system, these things are always working. Mm-hmm. So the digestive system needs a period of on and a longer period of off. And that refers to what I've been mentioning before with Dr. Don Klum's work. Our genes expect us to not be eating. And what he says is there's a start, stop, and start genetic expression. You want to start eating, you want to know when to stop, and then you want to know when to start again. This is food mastery. And it is a practice. So before you can master anything, first you got to get out of being a victim. You can't be victimized by the food industry, by the government, or your own behaviors and programming and conditioning. You have to lift yourself up and become the creator of your reality. Or in my world, you have to become the hero of your own journey and not the villain. But that's the battle. We're battling that every day. Let's
Yes.
face it. That's why I say we're warriors of our well-being until we get a certain amount of mastery, which is the next level, which is the Toltec wisdom. First, you're a victim and you speak like a victim, or you use language like a victim. Then once you snap out of it and you say, wait a minute, I'm going to take control of my life and my health and well-being, then you become a warrior for your health instead of a warrior, W-O-R-R-Y. Victims worry all the time about their health and well-being because they're not actively engaged in healing themselves. Once you're actively engaged in healing yourself, you become a warrior for your well-being. And then once you do this long enough and under great objective guidance, you can actually start leading yourself towards mastery. And that's with food. We want to actually have a mastery over food because why? Anything we don't have mastery over, we become a slave to. Mm-hmm. It becomes our master. Mm-hmm. And in the conscious healing journey, it's about becoming more of a master by knowing yourself and dealing with that first battle, good versus evil within me and outside of me, whatever. Mm-hmm. And then you want to know what's true and what's a lie, right? And you want to know what's right and what's wrong. That's the first battle. And we want to choose what's good, what's right, and what's our truth. That's the empowerment process. And food is just one pillar that we can use in order to recover some of that empowerment.
Oh, I love this. For me, audience, every word that Dan says is gold, and I really do hope you come back to the recording of this. There's layers of even myself that needs to come back and re-listen to it. It resonates very deeply. What catches my ear is Dan keeps emphasizing what's good for you. You need to reconnect with your body. We as people who have knowledge of what helped us in our recovery after cancer, we found what works for us. There's some of it is universal language. Some of it is universal knowledge. All of us should know. And there is an inherent, you want to make sure you're on board with it, because if you don't believe in what you're doing, right, Dan? I've noticed with my clients, if they're not buying into it, it can't be as effective.
Well, this is how we have to have them have a dialogue so that they can start exploring their own philosophy for living.
Thank you.
And again, their philosophy for food. What's your philosophy of food? And you might have to shift your philosophy or your beliefs and perceptions by gaining more knowledge. And when you apply the knowledge, you gain wisdom. You can't sit back and just feed yourself knowledge without practicing it in order to gain the wisdom. Like one of my teachers in the past, Master Luke Chan, he said, learning begins when you question. Oh. So if you don't formulate a question, you're not learning.
Okay, I get into jerk with a story. Last spring, I went on a retreat. It was after a year of mentorship with this woman I so loved. I love her. And unfortunately, it was a setup situation that for me ended up not being very safe. It actually was quite stressful. And without getting into those details, I got home and got on the scale because I felt that in my face, I looked very swollen. And I was like, what's going on with this? So when I got on the scale, I had gained 10 pounds during these 4 days away. And I didn't eat that much. When I spoke to her about my feeling a lack of safety, she joked, oh, it was because of all that Mexican food we fed you. And I was thinking to myself, okay, that's just being irreverent, but okay, that's fine. And what I've noticed since then is I use the scale if I'm eating my 3 balanced meals a day and getting rest and drinking and hydrating before I get thirsty, things like that, and exercising. I use a scale to let my body talk to me because I've been disconnected from my body, Dan, for most of my life. So I'm trying to reestablish this back and forth conversation. And when I got home after that trip, once I reset and recentered, my weight went back to normal. And now it's a precursor setup. Before I go away, if my weight is stable, I'm like, okay, I'm very centered, I can go. And then when I come back, I get on the scale and go, all right, Was that a good trip for me? Because I felt like it was a good trip, but I want my body to tell me, was that a good trip for you? And inadvertently, right? If there's been more resonance lately, I used to think of the scale as this judgment. It was shameful. I could never bring my weight down. Now I am very gleeful about it staying steady for me where I am now. Does that make sense? So I don't, sorry, I thought the point and story you were saying just now, Dan, I want the audience to start thinking of stories in their heads to how to apply this framework of what you're presenting personally to them. So that's what brought in mind to me.
Well, the weight scale is an objective, it's something objective, it's data. Our thoughts and judgments of it is what's the danger.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just data. And how I take that data in or receive it, I could take it personally, which of course, something's wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
Or I could take it as, oh, let me reflect on what I did and how I showed up. Now, in the case where you're at the retreat, there was a part of you that wasn't being heard or seen or felt for your truth. And then you shut the truth down. Essentially, you got overweight. You put on weight by holding back all this stuff because you did not feel safe. And even when you came out to say, I don't feel safe, they actually invalidated you.
They did.
And now that could be a retracing of someone in your life prior, a long time ago,
Yes.
that invalidated you to feel safe to come to, because you
Yes.
knew you'd be shamed or blamed or guilty or somehow. And so your authentic self goes into hiding. So your false self comes up and says, oh, okay, now I'll please you, or I'll do what you say, or I'll shut that off in order to feel safe.
Yes. The good news is I basically told her very firmly that's not acceptable, and I stopped working with her. I mean, we still are in contact through other programs, right? Because that's how we met. I'm no longer being mentored by her in that respect because that was a hard boundary for me. And in the past, I would have swallowed it and just negated my own feelings of being attacked during this trip, right? And so I loved that what you're saying, it correlated to an experience I had. For you, though, I want to ask you a question, Dan. These days, because you're a 6-time cancer survivor, that's for people who've never had cancer, that's almost unfathomable. Most people I meet have trouble getting their head wrapped around seeing me now that I survived breast cancer. And I would love, right? Looking at you now, I would never believe you had cancer 6 times. So between when we were in recovery to now, right? What could you share with the audience? A few points about what was part of that journey to get from there to here, where someone who's never even considered some of the things you and I talked about just now, like how can they wrap their heads around why we're saying to them, why is it so important for you to get in touch with yourself before you start blindly following things like intermittent fasting? None of those programs I've ever heard of will ask you to look back first or replenish first before you start to regiment your eating.
Got to replenish. Yeah, because it takes energy to transform your life. And so we have to find out where our energy is being drained and misguided, and then recapture that energy to put towards self-love, right? Self-love is essentially the only absolute love. So the beginning place when I was diagnosed with cancer was definitely, I need to learn how to love myself.
Bingo.
And people don't understand what that means. It's not a selfish endeavor. It's actually the best thing you could do for yourself and the world. Yes. Your family, your kids, everybody, is to demonstrate what it's like from an egoic, narcissistic place, from a humble, from a gratitude or an appreciation for life place, right? So self-love is simply an expression of self-mastery, a virtue of self-mastery. Now, self-mastery, don't get caught up in it being military. This is having the discipline, the self-discipline to say yes to who you want to be and become in the world. And more importantly, saying no, having self-control and saying no to the things that take you away from who you want to be in the world. So self-mastery is actually a great gift to your future self. Meaning self-discipline, say yes to those things, self-control, say no. So really it comes down to, do you know what's good, right, and truthful for you, and say yes to that? And say no to the things that are evil in you and that you know is a wrong thing to do. And obviously, we want to actually stop lying to ourselves and others. So it becomes that easy, and it becomes that easy in its concept, but then we rub up against our own constraints of reality and our humanness and our program and our unconscious, unresolved issues. And that's what makes it complicated.
Audience, this is the part where I really I urge you. You heard the introduction to Dan. I want you to go to his website, DanHegerich.com, danhegerich.com. It's so vital you go. If you're on YouTube and you're watching this on YouTube, you already got a website scroll of his website, so you know what it looks like. This journey of finding all of these things, it's lonely and scary, and you may want some guides.
You can't avoid it. You can't avoid it. You're going to get guides, and some guides are going to be false gods and misguiding. And that allows you to see what a real guide would be, a real mentor. And interestingly enough, cancer was a mentor. And
Yes.
Why do I say that? Because cancer taught me to return to my own self.
Yeah.
And that's what a real guide is.
Yes.
A guide is trying to help you return to your own expertise and own knowledge and knowing of what you are in spirit, who you are in personality and character, and what you love to do for the sake of doing it.
I love that. I love that. The reason why I even started my movement of Dance to Heal is to help people connect to themselves externally and then in that way lead to the internal. It is vital that we turn to remembering that the power is actually in us. It's not outside of us.
No, and this doesn't mean you do it alone. It doesn't mean that you don't actually inquire with external support.
Of course.
That's not what Jenny is referring to. And I'll give you an example. I had a client a long time ago who called me based on a referral. And he said he had problems with his heart. Something going on with his heart. So the referral came because he was busy. And we had a chat. And I said, let's go. And I said, why do you believe that there's something wrong with your heart? And he gives me a list of a few things. And then I said, well, you're on this call with me, so your heart's fine. Your desire to be better, your desire to know yourself, your desire to explore healing, that's a sign, a reverse indicator, which Phil Stutz shares in his own work, that's a reverse indicator that your heart is actually fine. And because you're experiencing empowerment that's uncomfortable, it might be causing you to feel anxious and heart fluctuations because it's your power coming back into you, which is uncomfortable and unfamiliar. And you're thinking it's something wrong. And I'm going to tell you, I think this is the right thing. And he actually got shocked into oh my God, this is amazing. So, we worked together for some time and, he's fine. He found his way back to himself.
Those words, back to yourself, back to yourself. When I was much younger, part of my not understanding until now was the more situations I was put in where I was having no power, which often people go, oh, no, I had a great childhood. And I always like to tell them, well, were you ever a baby? Yes. Well, were your parents born experts of baby handling? No, they had to learn on you in some way, right? And it's like, everyone's like, oh, you're right. I'm like, yeah. So we all handle what we perceive as trauma very differently, right? One child that was allowed to cry to sleep was fine with it. And another child ended up with a script that they were worthless and not worthy of attention, and they didn't have a voice. And that's really important to even find in yourself if you have those loops going. And people go, oh, you're right. I'm like, yeah, that's basically our life's work is for you to return to yourself before those situations happened. We come into this world with this knowledge of birthright, of everything, and then that's slowly reshaped, and we don't remember that. And I just love what your message is, to come back to that.
Yeah, and that's why we have to find tools and techniques and lifestyle skills or life skills to navigate that battle of good versus evil, truth versus lies, right versus wrong. And we want to battle that. That's our human experience. And that's really what Maslow's hierarchy of needs was saying. You come to the point of self-actualization, which means you create an identity for the world and you actually anchor in on it. So it's not like get rid of your ego. Actually, you have to build a solid ego before you can let it go. Meaning an ego identity in the world. And for me, if you create that identity to make a difference in the world, that's when you really start to get love power or love energy.
Oh, I love that. I love that. One of the things I started doing with my clients is to do mental fitness, where there's an app that reminds people to get present, because I have noticed oftentimes we're not present, even from 5 minutes to 5 minutes. And what do you do for your clients to get us present?
Well, there's a couple of ways. First, I want to give the concept, and then we'll go into that question. So you can't build, it's impossible to build a future self if you're loyal to the past.
Bingo. Oh my God. Wait, say that again.
You cannot build a future self or a future life if you're loyal to your past.
Okay.
So the first step in moving forward is to recognize when you're in your past. Without judgment, though. Just recognizing, oh, that's a past. That's something in the past. And you can see this with people when they're reminiscing all the time about their past wounds, their wonderings, their battles, or their frustrations, their problems, and excuses and reasoning. It's almost all memory. In fact, in food mastery, this is going to be a mind. It's going to screw with some people's mind. Most of the food you're eating, you're not eating the food, you're eating the memory of it. So you're not present with it. In other words, a lot of people get excited for their coffee before they've had the coffee because they're already consuming the memory or the association with it. So they're not even present with that cup of coffee as though it's new.
I'm getting chills. Audience, you're getting chills. I just took a sip of tea and I was like, wait, am I drinking the memory? Am I actually having in the moment? Hold on. Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is why kids can get excited with an ice cream before they even eat it. Because they're already associating it with the excitement they've experienced and programmed themselves. If they've never tried it, they wouldn't have that kind of excitement. It would be different. So now you're already in the memory of the past. And just recognize that. And then how can I make this fresh and new and alive? Now you're present. And the more you are present, you're creating a future self.
Oof. Audience, I really want you to just stop for a second. If you're driving, be careful. Okay, if you're listening to this in your car. If you're listening to it in a situation where you can just sit for a moment, pause the recording, and just let that sit in your body for a second. Okay, come back to us now. All right, listen. This is major gold stuff Dan is just giving to us for free.
Well, it's costing them their time.
And that is also, of course, of value and energy, right? To invest in this.
There's nothing for free on this planet. So when everyone says something's for free, you're already getting manipulated.
Well, and at the same time, it is priceless. The words he's exchanging with us. Okay, so I'll rephrase that. It's priceless. There's no money value in exchange that we understand in this consciousness of the knowledge that was just shared. All right, because this is something new. I speak to a lot of people, Dan. This is stuff that is a newer correlation that I think is going to make a huge difference for people if they really understand this. In my work, when I'm asking people to tune into their five senses, and then we do breath work, and then we dance to get people to be present, right? I love this, taking it out of that type of setting, even in just eating, being super aware of being present so that when you're eating, you're not eating the memory. Oh. All right.
Well,
So
you could, yeah. So Dr. Len, I'd like people to actually Google Dr. Len, Len.
Mhm.
And he was a proponent of the Ho'oponopono prayer.
Yes, I love that one.
Okay, and his story's pretty magical, where he was invited to be the psychiatric counselor for a mental institution with very aggressive, very dangerous
Yep.
inmates, murder, rape, the worst case scenario.
Yep.
And no psychologist or psychiatrist could actually be there for any length of time.
Right.
And I think there was 260 plus inmates there. And the place was in shambles because even the staff was affected with their attitude and with their presence, et cetera. So he came in and he never saw one inmate. He took all their files, he read through their file, and he gave the Ho'oponopono prayer, which is, I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you. And what he was saying is that because he was 100% responsible for everything that is in his reality, he would look at that person, he'd say, because I'm here and because that person's in my reality, there's something inside of me that's creating inside of him or her. And if I could cut the cord to that, it'll cut the cord in them. I think in 2 years, the whole place was closed because all the inmates had successfully became healed and were able to move into society in a productive way, just from the Ho'opono prayer. So I think we all have that ability inside of us, but we have to start with ourselves. But what he really said is that you're either coming from memory or living an inspired life. And I think we have to move out of the information age and move into the inspiration age.
Yes.
We've had our, industrial ages, we've had our information age. And I think people are actually really torn between, there's a lot of information, but all of a sudden they're saying there's too much information. So we have to move out of that and start to become inspired, which I call, you have to anchor in, or you might want to consider it reasonable to find your heart set. Most people are training mindset, but if you don't have your heart set on something, your mindset's going to actually become the master and you're going to be dissatisfied. I want to help you get to your heart set. What is your heart set on? What's your heart's desires in this lifetime? Get your mindset around that and fulfill your heart's desires.
Did you hear me sing, folks? I'm so inspired by Dan's words. I'm singing. I'm very shy in singing in public. So there you go. That's transformative. So here's the thing, folks. I have to cut that. This is already twice as long as my normal interviews. Dan, please come back. Will you come back and we can do part B of this?
Yeah, we'll do a summer event. We'll do something in the summer.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're currently in Massachusetts, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, that's my hometown. So when I go visit my mom, we'll have to do
give me a shout. Yeah,
we'll have to do like a in-person thing.
That'd be exciting. An outdoor, a Massachusetts outdoor podcast. We could have a nice scenic vista and a picnic.
Oh, I love that. Then it'll be one of those all day long webinars. Log in when you want to. You're not going to get the recording, but come back whenever you want. It's live Twitch feed,
That sounds like it could be. We can make that happen, though.
Yeah. I think it's vital. I think it's vital for people to know that we are accessible. Go to Dan's website. you also have my gift of dance and heal, HEAL.com. So then you're invited through my email list to come to my monthly workshops. Dan, is there any last words you want to tell everybody before we have to let you go?
No, I think it's always signing off as you have to consider living with power and love with grace. There's only two ways to live. Health is the foundation to life. We all know that. Your vitality is your greatest asset. And then love is the purpose for living. And loving yourself is the epicenter for you to actually love the world. Yeah.
All right. I have nothing more to add. Thank you, Dan, for coming. Everybody, we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Dance to Heal with Jenny C. Cohen. Come back next time to hear stories of recovery through movement and learn more ways that you can move your body. To work with me and continue your journey, visit OutsideInRecovery.com. Are you ready to move?